The BrahMos supersonic cruise missile fired off a Su-30 MKI fighter jet hit the target, a ship with pinpoint accuracy in the precision strike. But before the December 29 BrahMos test, there have been a series of different missile tests this year. From the December 15 Agni-5 test to the November 23 Agni-3 test to the October submarine-launched ballistic missile test of INS Arihant, India's nuclear-powered submarine. So what do these missile tests mean for India and for India's adversaries? What's the message? Let's find out. As the booming year of India's weapons and equipment comes to an end, India flexed its military muscle once again by successfully testing the extended range version of the BrahMos Air Launched supersonic cruise missile. On Thursday, the Indian Air Force tested the missile against a ship from a Su-30 MKI fighter jet. The test has tested parameters of the missile which can now hit a target at a range of over 400 kilometers. Experts believe that with this test, India has effectively strengthened its offensive capabilities against any potential maritime threat.
It has successfully fired at 400 kilometers anti-ship missile. That is very good news, but this missile can go further than that. MTC, it does not mean that missile's range will be only 400. It will go to 800 kilometers also. It all depends on how we modify the missile and how you put.
The experts also believe with future modifications, the missile capabilities can be extended even further.
Range of BrahMos has increased to 400 kilometers. Number two, it is very successfully merged and managed to fire from an SU-30, which means that India has now got real good offensive capabilities against any attacking or any maritime threat that is there.
However, this is not just about one missile test. In mid-December, India tested its nuclear-capable Agni-5 missile. The upgraded missile can hit a target at over 5,000 kilometers. The test came at a time when India and China faced off in Tawang, Arunachal Pradesh. Earlier this year, India tested the Agni-3 intermediate-range ballistic missile in November. The Agni-3 again is capable of carrying a nuclear warhead and has a range of up to 3,500 kilometers. In June this year, the test of the indigenously developed Prithvi-2 missile was also carried out. Prithvi-2 has a strike range of 350 kilometers. Again in June, India tested the nuclear-capable Agni-4. The ballistic missile has a range of over 4,000 kilometers. With India facing multiple threats on land, sea and air by hostile and expansionist neighbors, the missile's enhanced capabilities will prove to be a deterrent for India's adversaries. Bureau Report, India Today. So from the BrahMos Air Launched supersonic cruise missile with an extended range to the Agni-5 nuclear-capable missile test, a range of over 5,000 kilometers, to the Prithvi tests, to the submarine-launched ballistic missile test of INS Arihant, the nuclear submarine in October. India has carried out a series of different missile tests this year when tension appears to be at an all-time high along the northern borders. So what's the message here? And are the adversaries reading the writing on the wall? Joining me on India First special broadcast is Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha, former Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Western Naval Command and a naval aviator himself. Group Captain MJ Vinod, a former Mirage 2000 fighter pilot, and Colonel S. Dinny, an infantry officer who commanded his battalion at the Pangong Tso Lake, understands the adversary on ground very well. Admiral Sinha, I want to ask you first, sir. I will come to the BrahMos ER test of the Su-30 MKI in just a moment. But I want to understand the significance of the Agni 5 test mid-December. India says 5,000 kilometers range. Some analysts argue the range could even be longer.
Well, thank you, Gaurav, for getting me here, and very happy New Year to you and all the viewers. Agni 5 is certainly in the category of 5,000 kilometers. We exactly don't know as to what will be the ultimate range. I think probably Vinod will be able to tell you more. But there are two reasons for that. One is very much it is a part of the ongoing test of a series of these missiles, and certain number of tests are required to prove it, fit into our strategic force command. And second one is that ultimately it must be launched from an underwater platform, meaning the submarines, nuclear submarines that you mentioned. As you know that India doesn't have SSN, but we have made our SSBN, nuclear propelled and nuclear armed submarine,
Yes.
and which is the third leg of the triad. So from that point of view, it is very important. The timing was such that the 20th Congress of the Communist Party of China had just got over, and there were things happening on the border, as you know, in Tawang, and therefore it fitted in very well with our program. There was a little bit of changes done into the date. Yes. Because there was a snooping ship in the Indian Ocean.
Yes.
I think they waited for it to get out and move into South China Sea when they carried out the firing. So I think that timing and its range, it deters, and the timing was chosen very, very well, and ultimately it will go on a nuclear submarine, Gaurav.
Okay. Group Captain Vinod, is the BrahMos extended range the test of the SU-30 MKI? It's said to have hit the target more than 400 kilometers away with pinpoint accuracy. Would you see that as a routine test, or is India sending a signal to hostile forces who want to stretch their sea legs in the Indian Ocean region?
Thank you for the question, Gaurav. And I want to give a little prelude to first-time viewers who are novice to understanding what BrahMos is all about. The name BrahMos comes from Brahmaputra and Moscow, that I'm sure most of us are aware. Originally, BrahMos was thought as a surface-to-surface cruise missile, but now we have this air-launched version which is launched by SU-30, and I had the opportunity of being part of the release trials some time ago. I mean, almost 7-8 years ago.
Yes.
From there, we moved leaps and bounds, and MTCR was that time sort of a limit which capped us the range to about 300 kilometers, while the missile had much more inbuilt capability, which is what is aptly proven here. And see, Gaurav, the BrahMos ER and the next version of BrahMos is going to, we all know that BrahMos is a 3-mark weapon. And currently, neither China nor Pakistan or anybody, no air defense weapon in the world currently has the capability to pick up, intercept, and bring BrahMos down, which means it is more like a BrahMaster than BrahMos.
That's a very interesting point you make, sir. It's more like a BrahMastra than the BrahMos, because this supersonic cruise missile cannot be intercepted by anything that either adversaries, whether it's Pakistan or China, they may have nothing in their armor to deal with this. But Colonel Dini, given the deployment along the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh, given what's happening in the middle sector and Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh in the east, will China try to repeat another Doklam or Galwan elsewhere along the 3,500 kilometers LAC, or are these tests aimed at sending a signal to China that China's transgressions are no longer acceptable?
Definitely, Gaurav. I think these tests do send in a message. There's no doubt, and I believe that all these capability demonstrators are actually what I call as deterrence builders. They add on to the deterrence. Each test, whether it is Agni 5, whether it is this BrahMos, and for that matter, even a tunnel which is coming up along the line of actual control, adds as a deterrence to China and to behave in a manner in which it is, expected of two reasonably big nations to follow the rule of law and such like things. Secondly, I also feel that especially this BrahMos thing, I think one issue which comes to my mind, it's also an assurance. at least for the Indian Ocean region, that where India is aspiring to, or India considers itself to be the net security provider. So there, that assurance also comes in, because as Group Captain Vinod was saying, that already Sukhoi has a kind of a capability. Add on to that, this thing, it gives you that much more range and that much more assurance that India can provide that net security, whether it is from Malacca Strait or up to the Gulf of Aden. The third thing which I think we should not forget sight of, with this capability demonstrator, as we know that BrahMos is a weapon which India has offered to friendly countries. So when we show this development, I think more and more nations would come forward and would like to take this particular missile from India.
Okay, Admiral Sinha, missile test may be a deterrent, but that is if the balloon goes up, if there is conflict. But given China's actions, whether it was in Doklam in 2017 or Galwan 2020 or Yangtze 2022, China tries to alter the LAC without declaration of war. It keeps the threshold low. Now, when it keeps the threshold low, how do these missile tests have any impact whatsoever?
Well, I think they will continue to do these small skirmishes on various parts of the border. This is not the last one that we have seen. Though the gap between two of these skirmishes could be longer, but certainly for a while, they will, keep their sort of tempo down. Because if you recall that even earlier missile tests, for quite some time there was peace, and wherever there was lull, they would, move in, just to tell you that, we shouldn't be relaxing at all. They do have an impact, and they certainly will keep it below the threshold, as they say, the gray zone tactics, because a full-fledged war is more bad for China or worse for China than it is for India, because they cannot replace the US from the top slot of economics and military power, because the destruction will be, India will retaliate. Yes. And to assume that India will not retaliate, I think it's a wrong presumption by China, and they should not test patience of India. However, I'll just make one cautionary point, Gaurav, that this Su-30 450 kilometers range, it's a very good thing. But remember, at sea, 90% of the targets are merchant ships who have the right of innocent passage.
Yes.
And therefore it is the present missile development was basically designed, or basically the aim was to act as a counter air operation into the Tibetan plateau, so that you could hit the targets quite far, the runways quite far. Here, the target has to be tracked for number of hours, number of days before you hit a target, because hitting a merchant ship is a total disaster, and there can be many more problems.
You're absolutely right, sir. Colonel Dini, since we're talking about the Tibetan plateau, there have also been a series of declared anti-tank guided missile tests, from the Helena ATGM of the helicopter in April to laser guided ATGMs in June. Again, is this a very clear message to China on the Tibetan plateau? The fact that we are showing we have tanks there, the fact that we are testing ATGMs, is China reading the writing on the wall, sir?
Absolutely, Gaurav. See, one of the things which has dramatically changed is, I think, is the presence of armor there. The presence of tanks in this altitude, especially from the Indian side. That actually has changed the complete the way battle is fought in this high altitude. And that is what I think China is wary of also, especially in the eastern Ladakh area. There are areas where you can use the tank in an offensive role, and which can have a decisive impact on the war there. And therefore, China has realized that, and China has also, made its own movement to bring in those tanks. And this particular anti-tank, guided missiles, both from the air and from the ground, will have a, will especially with Indian side occupying those key passes, it will definitely become a very potent kind of force when this war of attrition starts at that altitude. It is actually the war of attrition which is going to happen there. And there, I think Indian armor and Indian anti-tank guided missiles, they will definitely have a big role to play. Gaurav.
Also the kind of disruptive weapons that we are acquiring, some that China already has in terms of the swarm drones and the UCAVs. Group Captain Vinod, with Pakistan, India was able to use air power to send across a very decisive message after the Pulwama terror attack in Balakot. It's kept us safe so far, but Pakistan once again has started sending in terrorists. Does air power have a role in the current form of tensions with China, or is that a very restricted role? The Agni tests or Prithvi tests or SLBMs, in your appreciation, are they only symbolic?
And I thank you for this question, Gaurav. In fact, if you had not asked me, I would have probably covered it myself. Let's look at the entire terrain north of the watershed of Himalayas. Other than Hotan, which is slightly lower, there is no other airfield from where a massive air attack can be launched, as opposed to what we have on this side of the Himalayas, where most of the airfields are at quite low altitude, 1,000, 2,000 feet, and we have 30, 40 of them strung across the entire region. So if you look at north of Uttarakhand and that region, there are only 2 or 3 maximum that they can put against 30 or 40. Okay. Come on the other side towards the northeast of India. They have only 3, at the most 4, and all of them are at high altitude. Beyond 10 o'clock, no air attack is possible. Yes. And imagine a BrahMos or a Hammer or a Scalp launched from our side of the border without even touching or coming anywhere close to the international border, can wreak havoc in their camp. So it will be better than the Spice 2000s that we launched across in the Balakot strike. I mean, okay, which you are very well aware. So when we come to air power, thanks to the Himalayas and the terrain, we are sitting pretty. I mean, whatever you may do, आप गड्ढा तो खोद के sea level में नहीं जा सकते हैं. So the terrain is very much against them. Okay. Now comes the cruise missile part. So they have a subsonic 0.7 Mach cruise missile, which is a reverse engineered Tomahawk version, yes, CJ-10, DH-10. We now have the topic of today's discussion, the BrahMastra, which is BrahMos. Gaurav.
Absolutely. That's actually very heartening to hear. Admiral Sinha, in October, there was a submarine-launched ballistic missile test of INS Arihant, a nuclear-powered submarine. You alluded to it, you spoke of it. From the timing of the test to the kind of test, routine, or if you were the Chinese PLA Navy chief, would you be concerned?
Quite concerned, Gaurav. Firstly, let me just talk about the test fired from the Arihant. We have done a lot of tests from the submerged platforms, but from the submarine per se, this was the first firing. Yes. So the standard operating procedures had to be validated. The crew had to become very confident, and so did the Strategic Force Command. They created a situation where he was to respond, and the firing was done. Everything went as prescribed. A second point you mentioned, does it worry them? If timing does worry them, now for example, I was watching some of the television clipping of the Chinese media, which had, dubbing or maybe titles at the bottom in English. The Eastern Air Command carried out, massive exercise recently. And the entire Chinese media was absolutely going red that Indians have, done an exercise in which the SU-30 and Rafale and all kinds of fast super jets have been utilized. And if they get airborne and they carry out attack on Tibetan Plateau, where do we go from here? So there is very much concern. Most of the TV channels in China have covered this. So I think that, a missile, a nuclear missile, rattles even more than a pure exercise, because the ranges are very high, Gaurav. Yes. Today you have fired a 750, 800, 900 kilometer range. Tomorrow it's only a matter of time that you'll be able to launch submerged 5,000 kilometer range Agni missile, Gaurav.
Oh, absolutely. So the stronger you are, Group Captain Vinod, the more powerful you are, the lesser are the chances of conflict. Nuclear missiles are weapons of deterrence. We have a declared no first use policy, but with reports of India being capable of testing missiles with a range of 10,000 kilometers or 12,000 kilometers, the conversation around hypersonic glide missiles or the conversation around multiple independently retractable re-entry vehicles, MIRVs. Sir, are India's adversaries getting that message that salami slicing of Indian territory is no longer acceptable to us?
Absolutely, and for the for the sake of clarity and to the advantage of viewers, I want to tell you something. The definition of a kilometer. Kilometer की परिभाषा क्या है? It is 1/10,000 average distance from pole to equator. 1/10,000 of piece of distance from pole to equator. 10,000 kilometer range should give some perspective. The perspective is that a 10,000 kilometer range can reach from equator to pole.
Yes.
So that is the kind of ranges we are talking about.
Yes.
And like you correctly covered, a weapon of deterrence, I call it weapon of peace. But testing this, and we, mind you, both China and us, both are NFU, first use policy we have.
Yes.
So under the missile umbrella, Gaurav and I have been saying this and written about it, under the missile umbrella, a conventional war will be a much more bloodier war than not under the missile umbrella, as Russia and Ukraine, as you can see.
Yes.
So it is going to be, what do you say? It is going to be a war, if at all, if it happens, will tilt the entire favor towards or away from China. And like I am completely echo what Admiral is saying, which China absolutely cannot afford.
And yet China gives us niggles at the LAC, Colonel Denny. Will the missile tests in the Bay of Bengal or in the Indian Ocean region deter China from misbehaving either in Ladakh or in Arunachal Pradesh? Or is China so confident of its rocket force and missile force and its disruptive weapons and the fact that it can launch maybe a cyber attack, as some argue it did, stealing all the documents from the All India Institute of Medical Sciences? India's on the defensive.
On the contrary, Gaurav, I would put that, we all talk of the Chinese assertiveness in the line of actual control. I think it is the Indian assertiveness also which should be seen in, and the Chinese reaction to it. It is not that always they are the people who take initiative and do, whatever they have to do on the line of actual control. So Indian Army and the Indian Air Force who are there, they also have their task cut out and they also do whatever is required to be done. So I think all these tests and all the capability, what we mentioned earlier, acts as a deterrence, but that will not, stop China from doing whatever it has to at that level.
Okay.
But at the same time, when the soldier stands there face to face, he knows that he's talking to a strong army, a professional army, so that respect will always be there, Gaurav.
Fair enough. I will let that be the last word on this part of the show. Admiral Sinha, Group Captain Vinod and Colonel Dini, as always, many thanks for joining me here on this India First special. To all our guests and our viewers, wish you a wonderful 2023, safe, where we all continue to keep India first.
Thank you.